All right, well, hello everybody. Ethan here from WordTech, back with another video. That's my normal intro, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, hello everybody. Welcome to WordCast. We are back. This is WordCast number 58, and as you're probably clearly aware, well, we're not live right now. This is pre-recorded, which might seem weird to some of you that haven't seen the recent channel updates. So anyway, basically, this is the new format for WordCast now. It will still be Daniel and I, as well as potentially other people. It's the same kind of idea. They might not be quite as long, a little bit better formatted for you guys. But the reasoning behind this is because, well, frankly, the live viewership wasn't that great. It was a lot of extra setup, and we weren't able to change the date to a time that made more sense to do it live. We weren't able to put this on like a Saturday or something.
Yeah.
And honestly, like right now, it's like almost 9 o'clock Pacific time. Most people wouldn't be awake right now to watch this live.
And it's hard to get a time that we can guarantee that we can do it consistently set up, whereas we can record this a day or two in advance, and just whenever we really need to, we can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of which, today is... it's not June anymore. I almost said June. Today is July 17th, 2018. So any news that may have come out over the next, 2 days before this is uploaded, we will have missed, of course, because this is from today and back. But basically, we'll be covering the biggest topics of the last week-ish when we do these. Anything that we maybe missed in a previous week might be in this one, might be in a given week as well. And the general upload date is going to be Thursday mornings for you guys, because we film this on Tuesdays. We do the editing on Wednesdays. So
eventually, we'll have a dedicated intro for this, but...
Yes, we'll create a nice one at some point. But for now, you are stuck with shitro. Yeah, so, whatever, though. And we'll also have better microphone setup at some point. Don't know when. Whenever I decide to get a better microphone setup for live streaming games and stuff, we'll use that as well. But this is what we got for now. I apologize for any banging on the table, although I will attempt to remove all of that. But I guess from here, we can jump straight into it. This looks exciting. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, this is kind of crazy. So, we haven't talked about it, because we haven't been here the past few weeks.
It's been a lot of weeks, by the way.
Some of you may have seen the news that on next generation NVIDIA graphics cards, there was the rumor that they were going to have a proprietary connector for VR. We've got some more information on that, and it's a lot different than what you may think. So for one, probably the most important thing, it's not proprietary.
Which I'm glad about. I think NVIDIA is in a position where they could make it proprietary, sort of. It wouldn't probably ever catch on, but they could do it because they're mostly a monopoly.
We had talked earlier about how realistic that was, and that Oculus isn't going to support it because they want to get as many people as they can, and so
the important thing about VR right now is getting more people introduced.
Yes,
not capitalizing on it as much as possible. Or even making much profit. It's just getting people to try it and use it.
And Microsoft isn't going to support it because with the Windows mixed reality headsets, because it's made for a lot of different things. It's meant to work on laptops, everything that can just pretty much run it. And Valve probably wouldn't support it either. They generally like more hardware.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless NVIDIA...
Valve's not usually into proprietary hardware too much.
And so the only way that NVIDIA could have forced that, or tried to, would be to...
Well, the only way they could have made it actually potentially successful, would be to make their own headset, right?
Well, what I was going to say is the only way they could have tried to force Oculus and Valve and Microsoft to support this standard would be blocking all of their partners from using HDMI. And that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
As long as HDMI was an option, these companies were going to use that.
Yeah, NVIDIA would have to literally remove HDMI from their GPUs.
Yeah, and all third-party ones.
And yes, which would be...
So, ultimately, when you really think about it, a proprietary port, completely unrealistic.
Yeah.
Instead, what we've gotten announced is a partnership between NVIDIA, AMD, Oculus, Valve, and Microsoft. So
couple of big names in there.
Yeah. So it's not uncommon within, especially the PC industry, but just with the tech industry in general, for there to be these consortiums of big companies that work on standards that work across everything. It's a good way to
it's
get
pretty
feedback
common,
from
actually.
everyone.
Yeah.
USB, DisplayPort, VESA.
Even HSA. Yeah. The HSA Foundation was one of those. Yeah. And, it may have been driven by AMD, but there were so many other companies on board.
Blu-ray is a good example. Everyone likes to think that Sony owns that. No, they just helped.
Yeah, they help develop the standard.
Yeah, so what we have here with this, it's called VirtualLink, and it's a single high bandwidth USB-C connector, not Thunderbolt, though similar overall bandwidth. It's structured specifically for VR, so it's essentially an alternate USB-C.
It's a little bit more bandwidth too, correct? Yeah.
So what we have is 4 high-speed DisplayPort lanes, 8.1 gigabits per second per lane, so a total of 32.4 gigabits per second of dedicated bandwidth for video. But we also have USB 3.1 Gen 2, so 10 gigabits per second of just straight up data throughput for whatever is
whatever the developers of the headsets decide to do with that 10 gigabits is kind of up to them.
Whether that's audio, whether that's
obviously it's going to be some controls and stuff.
Inside out tracking, especially on the Valve side of things, that's going to obviously be where a lot of that goes. That would allow for potentially more sensors, potentially better tracking to all be sent through that headset and through that USB cable.
Yep.
On top of that, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of mods, a lot of different things as far as finger tracking using cameras.
Yeah.
Some people will mount the Magic Leap, or not Magic Leap, whatever that is, the actual finger tracking sensor to the headset.
Right. I think that is the Magic Leap.
Might be. I own one. I should know.
Well, whatever. I mean, you own one, but it's probably in a drawer somewhere, right?
Oh, I know where it's at.
You know it's
in a drawer.
I know which drawer. You know which drawer. Okay.
But yeah, so that could be integrated into the headset, pass through this. Any headsets that have built-in headphones, all of that audio can go through there. 10 gigabits per second for that type of thing is a really good amount. It's a lot more than what's used now, because what's used now was designed around USB 3.
Right. And realistically, too, they don't need a lot more bandwidth than what USB 3 offers for that. It's just this gives the added ability to do more things at once, do some of those things better, whatever the developers end up wanting to do with it, which is great. And that's awesome. And also, we should probably mention that the bandwidth that's offered for the display in specific is enough for 4K 144 hertz?
4K 120 hertz.
120 hertz, yeah.
So
without HDR, though,
yes,
correct?
8-bit.
Okay.
So essentially what we're looking at is about double the video bandwidth and about double the data bandwidth.
Right, okay.
And you're getting and you're going from 3 cables to 1, because this also supports 27 watts of power, which is...
And that is actually probably my favorite part of this, is just the fact that you don't have to use any other cables to run it or any other batteries. It's just this one cable. And this is what we need for high-level desktop VR to happen the way we want it. Console and desktop VR. This is what we need. Obviously, the end-all solution is standalone headsets and stuff, but even then, I think there's going to be these 2 categories of VR for the indefinite future, where we have the lower end, but maybe still amazing in a lot of ways, standalone headsets that you can use for various things, as well as we'll obviously have augmented reality as another thing. But I think high-level desktop PC type stuff and high-end consoles like the Xbox One X and stuff will be where VR remains the premium experience. And that's kind of how it is in the market right now, right? Is you have mobile games and stuff, and then you have the consoles, and then you have PC to step up after that, and having these different levels that are different price tiers for a different experience.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that's going to stick around a long time for that experience. I do wish that they had figured out some way to add enough bandwidth for the display specifically to handle the 4K HDR instead of just standard 4K. Now, of course, we could do 4K HDR at 90 hertz, right? So, which isn't too bad. 90 hertz is the minimum okay for a VR headset.
Yeah, I think that most realistically, we're looking at probably 2 refreshes before we would have 4K or higher at one, let's say 4K 120 hertz and HDR all in one headset.
Right, because the displays for that is,
At which point, we're going to have 3 or 4 years worth of new graphics cards at a minimum. It's 4 to 6 years for 2 more generations, based on the fact that we still don't have 2nd gen VR.
Yeah.
So if we, let's say we get it next year, and we keep the same timetable for refreshes, that's probably about 5 years out.
Right.
They can just easily they literally said this is version 1 of VirtualLink.
Yeah.
So they fully expect to be doing refreshes of this, and it should be backwards compatible.
I would imagine, yeah. I mean, as long as they keep the connector the same. So
pretty much what it'll be is in 5 years, when they have a 4K 120 hertz HDR headset, or they have an 6K 120 hertz 10-bit headset, then at that point, that's when you would need to upgrade your graphics card.
Yes, right.
I don't know how many graphics cards that I expect to release next year that would support 4K 120 hertz at any decent graphic settings.
I mean, really, the only thing that can even kind of push that now is like 1080 Ti's or Titan XPs in SLI, and that's way out of most people's budgets and way out of realism. And like 4K gaming in general is something where I think we finally have a card that can, in some ways, it's still pushing it, be called a 4K gaming card. We have the 1080 Ti, right, and that can do that. I think realistically, to do it properly, you still need 2 of them, but 4K gaming isn't really going to be this widely accessible thing, and it's going to be the same thing with 4K VR. Even if the displays are affordable, until we have mid-tier GPUs being able to handle that. We need a 1060 level card that can handle 4K at a decent frame rate at near max settings. And so we need that to scale down for quite a while. So it's going to be a while before we have enough graphics leaps to properly do that anyway. What I feel like with true next-gen GPUs, if we don't see a refresh, is we're going to end up in a situation where we have a single card that's going to be capable of properly pushing 4K, but it's going to be the top-tier one still. So we're going to have a top-tier card that can out-compete like 1080 Ti's and SLI at 4K.
Yeah.
So you're actually at max settings getting 100 plus frames a second. But it's going to be like $900.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, it's a while before this display standard will have to be replaced anyway.
Yeah.
So, and of course, this is all uncompressed. And in theory, you could use display stream compression to achieve the higher frame rate and HDR, albeit maybe mitigating some of the advantages of HDR. But
HDR is going to be complicated on VR headsets anyway because, as we talked about before, brightness is a key thing for HDR.
Yes, and I don't want
blasting 1,000 nits into your face is not good.
Not a good idea, especially when you're surrounded by darkness everywhere else. It's just like that's not something that people should experience, right?
And I think that might be a factor into why they decided to go with this bandwidth initially.
Could be. It could be.
It's like
they don't see a need to spend the R&D budget to go further than that right now, and I think I could agree with that. So, and I mean, HDR in itself is just a really, really complicated technology overall, right? It's just there's so much fluctuation. It's just as complicated, if not more complicated, than like adaptive sync technology. You know, variable frame rate or variable refresh rate. It's just not a simple thing to figure out, and this is part of why the HDR G-Sync displays that are out there, and by displays I mean the 2 brands that sell the same one, are incredibly expensive, is because NVIDIA's charging a lot of money for the G-Sync module, more than probably anybody thinks they should, and I agree with that sentiment, but they're charging more for it because they had to put a lot of R&D to even get HDR to function properly with G-Sync. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, and then even then, you know, if they go with this, it's like HDR has all these different standards, all this, they probably want to wait until HDR is just figured out and simplified.
Right.
Until there's just 1 or 2 standards being used and they can just say, hey, use this, it'll work.
So I think realistically we'll end up seeing 2 standards eventually, where we have basically your HDR that's designed specifically for like televisions and stuff like that, and then we'll have HDR, another standard that's designed for like VR. That's probably what the long term is. But we may also see this continuation of a mid-tier mid-tier HDR, where it's not as much about the brightness and is more so just about the wider color gamut and the better contrast delivery, right? So moving on to the next topic. Once again, this is the 3rd time we've tried this, guys. So anyway, moving on to the next topic. Interestingly enough, we have ran across a report, and a lot of other places reported about this as well, from a company called QA Consultants. Now, they did a whole bunch of testing into PC graphics driver stability and specific. Now, full disclosure, AMD did commission QA Consultants to do this, but keep in mind, commission is different than, say, you know, directly paying a company to look into that or something like that. This is more so like they're a separate company, but AMD is the one that kind of enticed them to go look towards this. And there have been other cases of that in like the security industry where stuff like that's happened. It doesn't mean that this is a biased report, but of course I want everybody to know that. Now, basically, this is a quote directly from QA Consultants. AMD drivers are the most stable in the industry for gamers and workstation users alike. Now, they did a whole bunch of testing, and this wasn't just like with base-level gaming graphics cards. They tested a lot of gaming graphics cards as well as a lot of workstation cards, including things like a Quadro, to see the stability. And obviously, like a Quadro is supposed to be, you know, stability is more important. And what they ran across was that AMD has 93% stability, meaning basically of the testing they did, they only ran into problems 7% of the time out of all the mass testing they did, whereas NVIDIA was a lower 82%, meaning they ran into problems 18% of the time, which is substantially more frequent. When you look at it in that metric, it's like double the amount of problems, right? Now, of course, that's not necessarily to straight up state that like NVIDIA has bad or problematic drivers. I've ran into very little issues with them, although I will say my experience between the two companies of recent, my AMD drivers did have less issues, although very little on both sides. Now, what this this actually makes sense for the industry, because AMD had, honestly, pretty horrible drivers for a period of time, and then they had acceptable drivers for a period of time, but they've been consistently dumping money into working on that, and NVIDIA hasn't needed to, because they haven't had driver problems. If you were to ask me 4 years ago, it would be, NVIDIA, go with them. Like, I've actually, at the time, would have recommended go with NVIDIA because the drivers are better, even if the AMD product is technically faster and technically maybe even cheaper. It's the drivers were a big enticing point, and they're just, this kind of points out that they're not anymore. And so NVIDIA hasn't really been pushing a lot of R&D into that realm because they haven't really had to, because they haven't had trouble. So this is more so AMD's caught up and then surpassed a little bit over what NVIDIA is capable of. Now, what I would like to see is a breakdown of just the workstations fighting, right? To see maybe it's only like a % difference in those cases, right? Which is like maybe almost margin of error. So,
because with this, so don't expect like to buy an NVIDIA graphics card and then 18% of the time that you go to play a game it not work or anything like that. These were much more extreme tests than what would obviously happen just playing a game for a couple hours, because it was 12 days of 24-hour stress testing.
This is like to push everything to the limit to find these issues, and this is equivalent to like when Alan Malventano from PC Per did the SSD reliability testing, where he just forced data down their throats for months at a time to see what SSDs died first. It's that kind of testing that they're doing here, where it's just overall putting as much stress as they possibly can on the system. And, so having, and driver issues tend to not be like problems with games or anything either. It's not usually common that you run into, this game doesn't work, or my drivers crash when I play this game. That's becoming very, very uncommon. What's more common is random little quirky things. Last weekend, I was installing a host bus adapter into my desktop to hook up some more hard drives. And in doing so, I hooked up my host bus adapter, didn't touch anything else in the system other than the hard drives, clearly. And then I unplugged all the power to do some cable management, plugged all that back in, restarted the computer, and one of my 1080 Ti's was not being recognized by the computer in terms of like NVIDIA's driver. If I load up NVIDIA control panel, it would straight up say, you do not have an NVIDIA GPU installed. And then I'd run into, okay, what's going on? Windows says I have two 1080 Ti's installed. Ended up, I had to reinstall the driver. For whatever reason, shutting down the computer and unplugging the power somehow caused some kind of weird issue. Maybe it would have happened even without any changes. Literally just, next time I turn on the computer, this might have happened. Made me have to reinstall the drivers to make things function like they're supposed to. It was really weird. So that's the kind of driver issues that you're possibly going to run into. Not necessarily like games crashing and stuff. Point really being of this article is to basically tell people that, hey, don't use drivers as a reason to buy a particular company right now. And that's, I think, important for gamers and stuff, is to not have the consensus of AMD has bad drivers, which it was for so long, because that made people want to avoid buying them, which arguably back at a time when they were maybe not performance per watt, but performance as a whole, more competitive, people bought NVIDIA because the drivers then. Right? And so there's some reasoning there too, and the drivers have gotten better, so for the people that were on AMD then have actually very little problems now. But anyway.
The document that's available that has all of this info does have quite a lot, so for anyone that wants to get more information and look at specific test results for different
we'll link that in the description. We'll link all the articles.
It's interesting to skim through here and see, like, one of the problems for NVIDIA, which AMD had some of this come up but not as much, is that a lot of the NVIDIA graphics cards, especially the P600 Quadro, seem to have quite a lot of this, is that they couldn't even attempt it because of hanging.
Oh, that's weird.
So, like, literally 3 of the 12 days that they did testing, the Quadro P600 has no results because it failed 1 result each day and hung the rest of the day.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
That's
so
really
there's that.
weird. Although we've known for a while, like, at least right now, AMD is actually more competitive, not necessarily in terms of market share, but more competitive in terms of performance and price to performance and performance per watt in the workstation and server market than they are in the gaming market.
Yeah.
So some of that actually makes some logical sense.
Yeah, and when you look at it, like, every Quadro, along with, I think, let me find it again, every...
Fire Pro or something?
So only one of the workstation cards didn't have hang issues at some point or another.
Yeah, okay.
The only one that didn't was the WX 7100.
Okay.
Which that one only had, 5 fails over the course of...
Right, which, again, this is strenuous enough. Like, there was a lot of failures. Like, there was... Every test had failures, so that's important
to know. 580 only had 1.
The RX 580?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, and that's evidence right there of driver improvements. Yeah, and driver improvements, yeah. Like, when I had my RX 580 installed, right, come to think of it, I actually never had an issue with it. Mm-hmm. There were several times where I thought I had problems with the drivers.
Yeah.
And I'd reinstall the drivers and nothing would get better, and I'd find out it was something else later.
Yeah, 1080 Ti only had 2.
Yeah, which also goes to the point of, like, I haven't had any problem other than the one I just stated with my 1080 Ti's. So, drivers are in a good state on the graphics market right now. That's the point, which has been actually, I think that's a really important step in the direction that PC has to take to properly compete with, like, consoles and stuff, is because drivers being an issue can completely ruin an experience to the point where that doesn't happen very frequently, like, basically at all on consoles, and that does happen, not obviously, as this evidence shows, not that much on PC, but it used to happen more frequently on PC where you'd have quirks and you had to go try and work them out yourself.
So another PC hardware manufacturer news, some news about Intel and Micron. So for those that don't know, they have a partnership when it comes to 3DX or crosspoint memory, which is like Optane, for example.
Yes.
So currently, they both work on it together to develop and advance it, and they both each get 50% of what's manufactured.
Right.
And
Micron hasn't seemed to have done that much with it yet.
Yeah, but a lot of people are wondering what's going on because they're getting half, and they don't have their actual product released. So people are wondering if maybe they just have like a single or a couple companies buying it all up.
Right, or they have some kind of stockpile of it for some reason, which I don't know why they would unless they were planning to release, more budget-oriented stuff with it, or unless maybe they were... Maybe 3D Crosspoint's going to be getting used in some special, like, new GPU or something, which wouldn't be impossible. I mean, there is potentially a market for non-volatile memory and things like GPUs, right? Obviously, we've seen, like, AMD release their card that you could put M.2 SSDs on so that you'd have non-volatile RAM. So there's potentially a reason for that, although 3D Crosspoint still isn't as good as actual DRAM.
Yeah, you'd think that would be a few generations out type thing.
Exactly.
Not using the first batch of hardware.
Right, yeah. So it's kind of weird that this is happening. So Intel is kind of maybe taking action?
Both of them. So essentially how this is working, so right now they're continuing their partnership through second generation, at which point both companies will still manufacture in the same fab. They just won't develop together. Presumably that
is like a recipe for corporate espionage, but anyway.
I think that what it most likely is, and this may tie into whatever Micron has planned for theirs, is that they want to develop it separate. Like, Micron might have buyers that they're selling to privately that want specific things, and Intel wants a more general thing.
Right.
And so for Micron, if they're going to lose out on sales or if they're just not going to sell as many as fast because they can't get this thing that's needed. Yeah. And Intel doesn't want to spend time on this thing that they don't need.
Right.
It makes sense for them to just make their own thing and ignore what the other team is doing because they don't need
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me if Micron focuses more on enterprise and stuff, and Intel
or
focuses
graphics
more
cards or whatever.
Right, whatever it may be, because Micron's the supplier for that stuff, and Micron doesn't really play in the consumer market that much directly, at least, right? They sell a lot of their flash memory to other companies, and those companies build controllers for their SSDs or buy controllers and market their SSDs as their own and stuff like that. Like right now, Micron, that's maybe a good thing, because the consumer Micron products that have released have actually been kind of problematic in terms of competition, because like right now you can get a Micron 1100 SATA SSD, which is a very solid SSD, in a 2 terabyte form factor for under $300. You can't do that from any other company, not even close, right? And so like they're able to undercut everybody because they're direct selling something that they manufacture, right?
Yeah.
So it's maybe a good thing for Micron to
also,
focus more.
Micron's name is terrible. QuantX.
Oh wait, that's right, because they're QuantX is the actual name, right?
Yes.
And Micron's a subsidiary, sort of. Or is it Micron QuantX?
I think it's just Micron QuantX. QuantX is just the branding for their crosspoint memory.
Oh, I get it. That's weird.
So it's like that's their Optane.
That's pretty horrible.
Yeah.
Quantix?
Yeah.
That just doesn't sound right.
No.
Quantix.
QuantX.
I mean, I'm saying it Quantix, so it's like quad ticks. You have like 4 ticks.
I'm very ticked.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty. I don't know. All right, whoever does the branding in that term should be fired. Just saying. Okay, so I guess next topic is not exactly PC related, although it is personal computer related.
So the MacBook Pros got a kind of subtle refresh, and by subtle I just mean Apple just kind of did it.
Now, do you want to talk about your first bullet point here first, or do you want to wait? Because you know I'm going to rant about that. Do you want to talk about that right now, or do you want? Let's go over
That's
kind of the big change, though, I guess, too, right?
It's an important topic for MacBooks, and I think it needs to be addressed. So obviously, MacBook Pros have had a lot of keyboard issues as of recent.
Yes, well, not just MacBook Pros, also the standard MacBook had a lot of the same issues due to the butterfly switch.
But
right?
the MacBook Pro is what everyone focuses on because it's a
pro device, right? And you can't have quirky problems with a pro device, especially something that people might drop $7,000 on.
So while they didn't completely redesign the keyboard, probably because they're still working on it, there's indications based off of some patents that people have found that there is something else in the works.
Right.
And so that seems to just not be ready yet. So what they did...
And this is just a refresh, so maybe it is ready and it's just not ready to be put in this form factor, right?
So what they did was they pretty much just used a little thin layer to cover the inside of the
the butterfly switch, yeah.
So that it helps reduce sound and prevent dust from getting in.
So, to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, guys, like I said with this first bullet point. So when the MacBook Pro first launched, I had a lot of problems with it. The newer MacBook Pro, right. Sorry, not when it literally first launched, but when the current MacBook Pro design here in 2018, July 2018, when it first came out, I had a lot of problems with it. Some of those problems inherently were they removed the fucking F keys, which was lame.
1 second.
Yeah.
He had a lot of problems with the ideas of it. He never bought one.
Okay, yeah, good point. I should point that out. These aren't problems that I experienced because I own one. I have no reason to purchase one. I don't like Mac OS at all.
Apple anything.
Apple anything, man. I raged about an iPad for like an hour to this guy today. But anyway, so these are problems that a lot of the industry talked about, a lot of reviewers as well as a lot of consumers. But there are also problems that I personally have with the design of what they chose. So we had the MacBook that released, and everybody was like, this is stupid. Not the MacBook Pro, the MacBook. This is stupid because it only has one port. It has a USB-C port. The keyboard feels like trash because they tried to make it as thin as possible, and it has all these little quirky issues. The performance is horrible. The thermals are horrible. And I tell people you're being stupid because this is a consumer-facing device. It's fine. The whole idea was to make it thinner, lighter, smaller. It's
literally like the Apple version of a Chromebook that just
it's really expensive. Yeah,
but to be fair, there's expensive Chromebooks.
That's true. Exactly. And to go even further now, they should have included a USB-C to USB-A dongle in the box.
Yes,
that is what Dell has done with their XPS 15 2-in-1. They include that dongle. That's what other companies are doing because it's cheap and you just should do it. It's very simple to do. But aside from that, I was okay with all those. It's like, you know what? If that's not what you want, if you want to get work done and you're not looking for this to be a media watching and social media machine and stuff like that, don't buy one. It's not for that. That's not what it was designed for. But when they fucking released the MacBook Pro, that had all the same problems. Like, we tried to make it thinner, so we put a thin, basically zero travel keyboard into it that clearly has a lot of problems, as we'll get into it a little bit more in a second. But also only is limited to either 2 or 4 ports. Got rid of the F keys. Doesn't have the best battery life. Doesn't have the best
Pro
performance.
machine for video editors and photographers. No SD card slot.
Yes, and not enough ports when you might be hooking up a whole bunch of shit to it. And then, of course, you run into the other issue of the 13-inch model could be had with a dual core. And I'm sitting here like, that's a consumer device class machine. That's like what your MacBook should be, the MacBook Air, and the MacBook Pro 13 is what the MacBook should have been. And then I would be okay with the 2 ports and the touch bar and the shitty keyboard because it's a consumer-facing device. It's not for getting work done. But to have such a horrible keyboard on something that's designed to get work done is horrible. Now, I will say I have typed extensively on the MacBook Pro keyboard because my friend has one. I specifically wanted to try it, and while I was only probably about 20 words per minute, which is significant, slower on that keyboard than say on my IBM Model M because I'm a keyboard snob, the feel and sound overall was a horrible thing. And a lot of people report this, both consumers and reviewers, even ones that aren't keyboard snobs like me, right? And it's because there's no travel distance. And like even the Dell 2-in-1, which is more consumer than professional, and also is designed to be thin and stuff like that, using their maglev keyboard design has more travel distance, better sound, and better key feel than this keyboard. And again, the problem isn't the design of the keyboard. I actually do think that at the time, I think the magnetic keyboard is more innovational, but I think at the time, when the butterfly switch came out, it was very innovational in a lot of ways. It was, how do we make things thinner? And sometimes it's a goal to make it thinner. And I will tell you, I'd rather type on that than a touch keyboard, and I'd rather type on that than no keyboard, right? But when you slap that on a Pro device to make the Pro device thinner, when people are likely to be lugging hundreds of pounds of gear with them when they're working with this machine.
Hundreds of pounds of dongles with them.
Yeah, hundreds of pounds of dongles. That's a good way to put it. And they still don't include a dongle in the box for this one, by the way. They want to charge you $70 for their multi-dongle garbage. Yeah. Anyway, and I also, the trackpad doesn't click on this. It's using Force Touch. That's not as big of a deal because it does genuinely feel pretty nice, actually. But they tried so hard to make this Pro device so thin, and that just isn't necessary on a machine that's supposed to get work done. Sure, make it look pretty, but it has to be function thought first.
Yes.
Good keyboard, good trackpad, good display. It does have a good display. Good performance. The 15-inch does have good performance. Good ports. It doesn't have good ports, right? Good battery life is also a thing. The battery life's okay on it, but it's nothing magical. And so they release, to fix this, keyboard issue, the big keyboard issue. I should probably preface and say what the keyboard issue
dust.
really is. The dust. So it is proven that a single grain of sand getting in the right spot, and when we say right spot, I mean obviously it sounds like, oh, what are the chances of it getting in the right spot? It's not as low as you'd think. The right spot on a given key will cause it to not work at all, or too much dust buildup. Now, a single flake of dust is probably not going to cause the same problem. Sand obviously is substantially thicker, but enough dust buildup will cause the same issue. And I think my buddy actually ran into that issue where he had to get his replaced. I can't remember, but it's very common for some of the keys to stop working with the butterfly switch. And the problem was they designed a device that's a Pro device, and Linus from Linus Tech Tips has talked about this too with the iMac Pro, that is virtually irreparable, whether that's related to repair network, repair certifications, or physically irreparable. You basically have to replace the entire MacBook or well over half the MacBook. It's ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
And to fix that, they just put a little silicon layer around it. And it's like, that wasn't that hard, was it, Apple? Was it really that hard to like engineer that? I would think they should have just added that in some of the later model MacBooks, right? Like when the BlackBerry Key 1 came out and the screen fell out, they added more glue to the same device. Yeah, the front fell off. Yeah. So they added more glue to the same device, and then it stopped having that problem, and for the most part, it didn't seem to affect their sales much. Now, of course, this being Apple, their sales won't change no matter what. They could make a trackpad that doesn't work, and they would still sell a whole bunch of them.
They could make a trackpad glued to a display, and it would sell.
It would, yes, exactly.
Literally, like, you could see the glue, like, on the display.
Yep, they could do it. They, because it's Apple, and we have Apple fanboys, and we have Apple's marketing team being some of the best on the planet. But anyway, so it's like this is just so frustrating.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm glad that they're kind of fixing it, but they still, they made the mistake of the design in the first place. So I don't expect them to change the keyboard entirely because they designed the chassis around it. They don't have the new chassis ready. But don't buy it for work.
Yeah.
Use an iMac Pro. Don't use the stock keyboard with it because for whatever reason Apple thinks it's a good idea to put their butterfly switch in a keyboard that's as thick as a MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
But the same travel distance on the key switch. I don't understand that.
I don't know why you're surprised when the company has the charging port for their mouse on the bottom of
the mouse. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like, oh, it's elegant. Fine. That's cool on a consumer device.
That's elegant.
Yeah, right. That's elegant. There we go. But in terms of the keyboard, sure, include your butterfly shit on the freaking standard iMac, but include like a nice custom by Apple mechanical switch on the iMac Pro. Do stuff like that. Make it a real Pro device because I want companies to stop fucking throwing around the word Pro to help their device sell. My XPS 15 is a hell of a lot more Pro than this stupid MacBook, and they don't call it Pro. They literally, this is in the for home section of Dell's site.
Are you done ranting? Because there's more for you to rant about later with this.
Yeah, okay, so I'm done ranting, although I actually do want to check, and I might cut this part out, but I do want to check if you can get the quad core on the 13-inch
Yes,
now.
I was going to talk about that.
Oh, okay, good. They fixed that. Okay.
Yes.
So let's continue.
Let's talk about specs. So they've made some changes. So now the 13-inch MacBook Pro without the touch bar is dual core. And the one with the touch bar is quad core, 8th gen, 2.3 gigahertz.
So, my strong opinion is the dual core still shouldn't exist.
I
but
agree.
At least we have a quad core option now, which is important.
You
can't get work done on a 2-core. You just can't.
Standard configuration for the 13-inch is the quad core, 8 gigs of LPDDR3 RAM, a 256 gig SSD, 4 Thunderbolt ports. You can go up to 2.7 gigahertz quad core and 16 gigs of RAM.
This is the 13-inch. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. We'll talk about storage at the end.
And the 15-inch we'll talk about too.
No quad cores on the 15-inch, so it starts out with the 6-core i7. You can actually go up to the
it's still kind of like the 15-inch is the real Pro device.
Yes. You can go up to a 16-core 2.9 gigahertz.
16-core?
Or
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. 6-core 2.9 gigahertz that can turbo up to 4.8.
You could put a 16-core in it at like half a gigahertz and 1-core turbos up to like 2.9. But yeah, okay. Yeah. So you can get some work done on a 6-core, even a quad core. You kind of can. Remember, guys, this is Final Cut, not Premiere Pro. You don't need a frickin' 1950X to do work.
Yeah, they optimize for their own hardware. They know what they're doing.
Right, and I mean even more so because like the optimization for the hardware, of course, they're using Intel and AMD products, right? It's not like I'm not using Intel and NVIDIA products, for example, right?
Yeah.
It's just
but
that
if they
Apple
release a 6-core, they can then make tweaks to make sure that it works well
They're
on
not
that
spending all their R&D efforts to be like, oh, well, we have these guys bitching over here that wanted optimized for their 32-core rig, and these guys bitching over here because their Pentium can't use our video editing software.
Yeah.
You know your audience better, and so Final Cut is an amazing piece of software. I will never effing use it, but it is an amazing piece of software in terms of being able to do actually pretty solid editing, even with 4K and like 6K content on something like a MacBook Pro. Although you'd still probably want an iMac for the best experience with something like the 12 or 16 core, right?
Until the Mac Pro comes out.
Until the proper Mac Pro comes out, yes. Which at that point is like, I hope they don't mess up and give you a mouse with a charger on the bottom and a butterfly switch keyboard with the Mac Pro.
Yeah.
Just sell it without accessories, for the love of God, please. Something.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So some other things before I talk about storage, because that's going to be another rant.
That is.
So the graphics card is a Radeon Pro 560X in the 15-inch.
Solid GPU for I mean, especially because Final Cut can optimize for that, and so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then some other changes. The T2 coprocessor, which was found in the iMac Pro, which is a like security processor, that type of thing,
Yeah.
is in this. It can also now, they added the functionality for being able to say, "Hey Siri."
Sorry,
and
everybody.
Initiate that. Nobody uses that watches your channel.
Oh, yeah, good point. Or that, exists.
Yeah.
In fact, our buddy used it the other day, and it couldn't Google search.
Yeah. So yeah, you can actually attempt to use Hey Siri on Mac Pro or MacBook Pro.
Yes. Well, I wonder if you throw Siri behind more CPU cores, if it starts to understand things better.
No, because it only runs on the coprocessor.
I'm kidding, of course.
Okay. But the other thing, and honestly, outside of like the specs and fixing the
keyboard.
Fixing
the broken aspect of the keyboard.
I literally mean fixing, not improving.
Yeah, not improving, exactly.
But to me, something that I'm really excited to see on this, mostly because I hope that other companies adopt it, but based on how Android's responded, I doubt it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
True Tone display.
Yeah.
I absolutely love the True Tone display on my phone, or my iPhone. My primary device is a Pixel. However, I also have an iPhone 8.
Yeah.
I wish that my iPad had True Tone. I have a couple gen old one. I think the newer ones do, but I'm not sure.
I believe they do. I think that's correct.
For those that don't know what that is, True Tone display essentially uses the sensors on the front of the device, and it can tell the color temperature of the room and slightly change the color when you
to
have
compensate
it on,
for bright fluorescent lights or out in the sun.
Yeah.
Or
so if you're in a really yellow room, it kind of shifts it a little bit, so it's more like paper, because paper doesn't stay one color. Paper shifts with the lighting.
Right, because paper's reflecting the light. It's not emitting the light. Yeah. Exactly. And so this kind of does the same thing.
And it works very well, in my opinion. I very much like it. It's something that if you just use it,
it's subtle enough you don't really notice it directly.
Yeah.
But then you realize that it looks so good.
Yeah, and if you turn it off, you're like, ugh.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I mean, that's something, and of course the display is still not true 4K and other things like that, but as we've seen, resolution isn't everything. In fact, pixels per inch is really important, but resolution isn't everything. A lot of things regarding color accuracy, brightness, HDR support, or like True Tone.
Even how the screen is made with like pentile versus RGB.
Exactly. All that stuff matters in a lot of ways more than just the pixels directly.
Yes.
And so it's still going to be a good display, just like the standard Mac, just like the iMac, or the standard MacBook Pro, just like the iMac Pro. Yeah. Good displays, right?
True Tone is something that you can very easily disable, which you'd obviously need to when you're doing color work.
Yeah, because you need to know what it's going to look like on everybody's display.
While I don't assume Apple will give users the ability to set it on a per-app basis, I would hope that they would allow certain applications to override it.
Yeah, and I mean, I would imagine, like what they should do realistically is just have it so that the devs can do that.
Yeah.
So Premiere Pro or Final Cut, of course, can, when they launch, True Tone just turns off and doesn't even tell the user, it just turns off.
Even if it was specifically apps that were in the Apple Store, because I believe you can get Premiere Pro through there.
Yeah.
But that way they can ensure that some random app that you accidentally download isn't just going to start taking over your display
and doing weird stuff. Yeah. Right. And so, I hope they implement something like that. In fact, I love the idea of applications being able to adjust colors on their own. That's something I'd like to see more development on, maybe even in like the PC realm and stuff. It'd have to be done securely though, of course, as you were saying.
But True Tone is something that I've wanted to come to Android phones for a long time.
Yeah. By
that I mean literally since the first time I saw it. And now I want it on computers.
Yeah. Yeah, everywhere. I mean, right? In a sense. It's great. It's a great... Now, imagine trying to combine G-Sync, HDR, and True Tone in one package.
Well, what I would imagine with how it would work, at least on the desktop level, would be being built into the monitor, not being software.
Right, and it's essentially just, it's intercepting, it's layering. It's layering is what it would doing. It's like putting a filter on top of the video feed incoming.
Yeah. And what I would imagine would be just having like a button on the monitor.
Yeah.
That would enable
although, of course, that depends how this is actually functioning. Maybe it's not functioning like a filter. Maybe it is dynamically adjusting portions of the image and not just putting a filter to adjust according to lighting, right? So it would depend how it's done, I guess.
Yeah.
But now we can talk about specs, though, right?
Yeah, well, we went over most of them. So let's talk about storage because this is...
Did you go over RAM? Up to 32 gigs of RAM, in case you didn't mention it.
I did mention that.
Okay, I thought you did.
It's DDR4 now instead of LPDDR3 on the 15-inch.
Yeah, right. Which is... I mean, RAM speed does matter, although we've seen with Intel it's not quite as important as it is with, like, AMD Ryzen, So storage is the fun part. That's where they
so when you're
they
looking
charge
at
a couple bucks.
when you're looking at picking out specs for this MacBook, if you want to go from the 6-core i7 to the 6-core i9, it's like $300. If you want to go up 16 gigs of RAM, it's like $400, which is annoying, but RAM is expensive and Apple is going to upcharge you and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, right.
Now, that, like, maxed out RAM, maxed out processor, and base 512 gigs of storage sets this MacBook Pro at $34.99.
Which is quite a lot of money. I mean, that's not insignificant, but, whatever.
If you want to go up to 4 terabytes of storage, it's $6,699 total, or $3,200
for 4 terabytes of storage.
Yeah.
Now, so we can say it's safe to assume that this is a custom solution soldered onto a board, so you expect it to be a little more expensive.
Yeah.
Right?
And the especially when you look at the fact that it's more than double. So, like, if you go from 512 to 2 terabytes, it's $1,200, which is a lot, but it's more than double that $1,200 to go up to 4.
To go up to 4, which is like, that doesn't make sense.
It seems to me that on top of Apple wanting to make a lot of profit, there must be something else going on.
Well,
whether it be
or
just them
profit.
forcing... Well, what I'm thinking is maybe that whatever custom solution they had to do for 4 terabytes, because 4 terabytes in like regular SSDs,
like regular
common.
M.2 form factor, you can't do right now. Yeah.
And so what I'm wondering is if they are essentially just getting the reimbursement of R&D out of the way for future iterations.
Right, maybe. But then again, I think the older MacBook, I don't think it was using M.2. I think it did have custom soldered solutions anyway, though. So I guess, it's just a matter of modifying the board to make it all fit, I guess. But, and I mean, you could maybe argue that maybe they're literally having to move other components around to fit it in that chassis.
Pretty much we'll have to wait for teardowns to
We'll have to wait for
get
iFixit
a better
to
idea
do
what's going
something.
on.
Yeah. But to give you guys an example of the overpriced aspect here, even if there's a lot of custom work done, so you can get a pretty solid 1 terabyte NVMe PCIe M.2 SSD, the Western Digital Black. That is NVMe, not to be confused with the ones out there from Western Digital that are SATA based, for $330. So you take that, you multiply that by 4, and you get $1,320.
Yeah.
Right?
So
this is more than twice that.
Yeah.
You could buy 8 terabytes of NVMe storage on PC. But now,
good luck getting that connected to anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have Threadripper.
Yeah. And I will say, for reference, if you want to upgrade to 1 terabyte, so an additional 512 gigs, it's $400. So it's still like double the cost.
Double the cost. Yes. So it's still overpriced. Now let's go, for example. Let's look at the here. I'm gonna pull up the 2 terabyte models, because there are 2 terabyte ones that are fairly expensive right now. So let's look. All right. So I'm not going to go off the 960 Pro or the 970 Pro, because both of those are being sold by other sellers right now. But on Newegg, if you look for the 970 Evo, which is a very fast drive still, and I would reckon is probably similar to the performance of the drives in the MacBooks. Actually, the 970 Pro probably outpaces it, especially because heat dissipation is a thing. You're looking at $800 for 2 terabytes. So you're still looking at only $1,600 for 4 terabytes versus $3,200. That is exactly 2x what M.2 would cost. So they basically were not... See, they're using... Okay, so they're using other laptops as comparison. We're looking at some comparisons here of speeds, and that's not a good way to compare things, because those are laptops with their stock configured SSDs, which don't tend to be as fast, and you don't pay out the bum for them either.
They're also testing the 13-inch, so the 15-inch might have different speeds.
Yeah, that's true too. And sometimes when you go up in capacity, you actually lose speed. It depends on how the controller handles the different chips. Because you're showing there, it looks like it's way faster than everything else on the market, but I can guarantee you if I dropped a frickin' 970 Pro in my XPS, it'd be right up there. In fact, the numbers that I was seeing there, the 970 Pro does beat So again, the point stands that it's fast, but it's not incredibly fast. And like they're claiming fastest SSD ever in a laptop, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with claiming that is that's only what's pre-included, which, as we know, are just not very good. Even my XPS, the SSD in it is just not very good for an NVMe drive, and replacing it isn't a horrible idea, although I already bought the 1 terabyte model, so I'm not going to buy another one.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Apple upcharging for stuff isn't uncommon.
And that's not uncommon. It's just crazy for them to be to be charging double for something as simple and non-custom, even though it could be custom in a way, of just storage. So
next topic, Intel related. Go ahead.
This one's kind of interesting. So some 9th gen rumors coming around. Now, I want to first say that this was reported by WCCF Tech. They're a rumor site. Take them with a grain of salt. I say that about other rumor sites as well, although I do think that this one seems in some ways very solid, aside from maybe the release date portion. But Intel 9th Gen is rumored to be released, or announced, not necessarily actually released to the public, on August 1st. Now, they will not be releasing, everything from the lineup, as Intel usually does. They start with certain products, usually a mid-tier and a high-end.
That's pretty much what everyone does.
And that's what everybody does, and it just makes sense. But this is going to be Coffee Lake Refresh, as we would expect, another Coffee Lake. But it's Coffee Lake Refresh. So as I said, this is designed to compete better with AMD. And so I've got the source open here to go over some of the specs, and then I'm going to rant a little bit about a problem I potentially have with this release, if it's
just
true.
Don't rant for too long.
Because we're starting. This is
and we still have to rant about Roku.
We still have to rant about Roku.
And
you still have to rant about Roku. This is true. All right. So going over just a little bit of a spec breakdown. I'm not going to go over all the models in the rumored lineup, but we have the Core i9, 99. Blah. I can't say that. I said Core i99 Core i9 9900K, which is on the 14nm plus, as we know. 8 cores, 16 threads. No idea what the clock speeds will be. The estimated price is around $450, which is actually a very good deal, because this thing is apt to be a beast, especially if you're willing to overclock in comparison to Ryzen. I hate to say it, but facts are facts, right? So it's going to be total monster if that is true. And then there's also the Core i7 9700K, which is an 8700K for $350. And then there's the Core i5 9600K, which is, well, an 8600K for $250, which we've seen some pricing of those 8000 series chips come around to those prices lately, so it would make sense that they're maybe preparing to release new parts that start at those lower prices. So anyway, I'm not going to go over any more of the lineup, because that stuff's even more far-fetched, because it's likely to be even further out. So no point in going over a lot of that information.
Yeah, and it's really not as important.
It's really not. So the thing I want to talk about here is the rumor has it that it's going to be on the Z390 chipset. And as we know with chipsets from Intel, they love to change chipsets so that you have to buy a new freaking motherboard. And that is not cool. And people are getting sick of it, and I hope Intel strays away from it this time. But it's getting to the point of being actually really frustrating.
You're funny.
Yeah. It's getting to the point of being frustrating because 2 years isn't even enough, Intel, and that's what you used to do. You used to give us 2 years on a platform, but now you're just giving us a year, and it's ridiculous. It's actually a problem, because people are having to spend more money, and that's not acceptable when you have boards that are perfectly capable of doing this. And don't go out there with the bullshit of, oh, well, they don't have enough power delivery. Of, oh, well, there's other features that don't work correctly regarding the chipset, and so we don't want to have problems with it. Don't give us that shit, because people were capable of getting the 6 cores to run on prior chipsets. Sure, it took a hell of a lot of work because you made it real hard, but boards right now, we have boards for these 6-core chips out, Intel, that could power 16-core chips. Now, not at maybe insane clock speeds, but these boards could power like a 1950X.
Yeah.
Right? The power delivery systems are that capable on them when you actually look at like a VRM breakdown of stuff done by, like, let's say, actually hardcore overclocking, Buildzoid, on some of these crazy high-end boards, and you go, this is overkill for the chip that you're using, and you would think, oh, well, they're making it overkill for maybe future products that are going to use even more power, but then you just tell us, oh, well, no, we're only going to put it on other chipsets. And it's like, that's not acceptable. And there's maybe one perspective where you go, oh, well, maybe the 6-core is going to struggle to run on the B and the H series chipsets of last gen designed for quad cores. So what do? You lock the B and H series chipsets out. and only allow it to work on the Z series chipsets of last gen. That'd be fine. That'd be fine because you can guarantee that the Z series are going to have pretty solid power delivery most of the time. There's a few ones that are straddlers out there, but of course, also you have to BIOS update in order to get the newer chips installed. So it's like, from that perspective, users that are going to be buying a new chip to drop in the board should be checking if there is a BIOS update for those chips. If there's not, then you don't buy it, right?
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, people might say, well, oh, that's locking out part of a generation. That's weird. It's already the same fucking socket. They're already locking out chipsets. They're making up a generation. It's not an actual generational change.
Yeah.
So, that's something that really frustrates me. And I'm not going to go off forever about it because people have talked about that with previous series chipsets and with Z370. And now we have Z390, which hopefully means that it maybe isn't going to happen this time. But I would be kind of surprised if it didn't. I fully expect, because we added 2 cores, you have to buy new boards. And that's something that AMD has sat on the standpoint of 4 years. We guarantee you 4 years from the launch date of our first gen Ryzen and first gen Threadripper stuff. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Because guess what? I went out on a limb and bought $500 worth of motherboard because I don't plan to replace that thing for another 3 years.
At least.
Yeah, right. Well, it's been a year. So, at least, although, of course, when I say plan, sorry, I more so should say, no matter how much money a given person has, they have no need to replace the board, right? I don't have a need to replace that board. I can. I have the option to, but I don't need to. There's not going to be a need for me to replace that board for at least another 3 years.
You'll find one.
Of course. I mean, I'll find one to buy more hardware,
Yeah.
right? Well, anyway, I mean, that's the point. And so this is just, Intel, this is getting ridiculous. You're doing this on all fronts. You're locking things out more and like locking out NVMe RAID to special keys that you have to buy that you've made incredibly hard to buy. Other YouTubers have talked about that. So that you can't do NVMe RAID. I can just slot drives in my board and switch on RAID 0 and it does it.
Yeah.
And this lockdown to keep their profit margins, basically, I think what it is they're basically trying to keep their profit margins near identical for a given product by lowering the product's price, even though the cost is not much lower, but then having all these other caveats, like you have to buy a new motherboard, which means we have another chipset sale and other stuff like that.
Or who knows, maybe, especially since things seem to be getting worse, maybe they're concerned about how much money they're spending trying to get 10 nanometer. Really,
so they're trying to pull in more to go towards that.
Make up for that, yeah. And
could
then
be.
hopefully they'll calm the hell down.
Maybe. I want them to get 10 nanometer right. And not to go off on a long rant at all about that, because we do not have a lot of time. But basically just to say, guys, yes, there's 7 nanometer coming out from other companies. No, it's not as good as Intel's 10 nanometer when it comes out. In fact, it's still not quite as good transistor density as Intel's 14 nanometer. So that's something to keep in mind. Nanometers are not the proper measurement for CPU architecture right now.
Jim Keller did an interview with Anantech, and in it, especially talking about this 10 nanometer, he made a good, interesting comment. So he's like, Intel's been a spectacular foundry developer, and that's a space that's super complicated, and they led the world for 20 years, and somebody has a hiccup, and everyone's like, oh, woe is me, what's going to happen next? Personally, I'm thinking, I know what's going to happen next. Fix it and keep going. It's like, once they get through this, they're going to have a far better process than everyone.
I didn't even know they did that. I have to go read that interview.
Oh, but that was a day ago.
Once they get through, they're gonna leap everybody again. Now, of course, there isn't a situation, and I can't remember his name. I think it's Josh from PC Per that talked about this. Is we're basically at a point right now where Intel's been developing stuff, but the other transistors are kind of catching up. They've had like a 4-year lead on everybody for like 20 years, and now other companies are touching up on that area because it's taken them almost 4 years to get this process architecture out. But that's because it actually is going to be really good when it launches. It is going to be the best in the industry when it launches. Nanometers are not everything. Transistor density is something completely different and is a better measurement of process architecture. And Intel is still winning the race on that right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we get to jump into another rant because this is the rant episode.
I'll make this quick though.
The rest is just rapid fire. So
but I'll still make it quick. So next up is Roku announced speakers. Woo. This is actually, it started out sounding like pretty interesting. I understood a lot of the point of what they were trying to do here. So they've got wireless speakers meant to sound obviously a lot better than what would be out of your TV, and better than most sound bars, but also...
And you get better left-right channels because you can put them further away than a sound bar.
But also not be as complicated to set up as a lot that are speakers. You know, a lot of people don't want to get a receiver and set up all the proper speakers, or they don't
hold a pairing button and trying to figure out which speaker's which, or whatever it may be.
They want to be able to just plop the speakers, click a button, and have them work.
Yeah.
Like, that's...
Right, and that's kind of the Apple dream, too, right? And there is something to be said for those kinds of things.
Yes. There's a reason that type of stuff sells. It's because that's what a lot of, like, normal people want. Like, a lot of people would be like, yeah, I'd like some better sounding speakers, but I don't want to deal with all that work.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, they want it as simple as plug and play.
And so that's essentially what we're getting. So these Roku speakers are wireless to the TV. You just plug them into the wall. There's I think like one button you press and it pairs everything up. They do have Bluetooth as an option as well for those that want to utilize that. But essentially the main functionality is it pairs with your Roku, either dedicated Roku device or your Roku TV. And it just works.
And now that may sound, it's proprietary, but again, the reasoning being you have to make it proprietary to make it as simple to hook up.
Yeah, and then they do some certain things with the software that's pretty interesting. So, for example, if there's any latency that the software notices when it comes to audio versus the video, what they can do is, because the TV or the speakers run Roku and the TV runs Roku, they can essentially use that to do whatever tricks they need, whether it's, very slight delays on the video to match up with the and make up for the delay on the audio, that type of thing.
Or vice versa if they had to.
Yeah, they can do different things to mitigate that latency. However, one problem is, let's say you're wanting to go play video games, and so...
Nobody does that, though. Nobody plays games
Let's
on
say
their
you're
TV
wanting to play games,
or watches Blu-rays on their TV.
And those games don't get processed through Roku, and even if they did, any added latency would cause noticeable impact in games.
And there's no Roku that supports that kind of stuff yet anyway.
Yeah, but I'm talking like even on the TVs.
Yeah, right. Even with the Roku built into the TVs.
But instead of, just having, because I have used wireless TV speakers before. I think a lot of people have heard them. Yeah. There's not like a significant delay.
The latency's not horrible.
Yeah. I mean, unless you have them really far away or you're using some weird tech to pair them, that should be fine.
Yeah.
Instead, it just falls back to your TV speakers when you're playing video games.
Or watching a Blu-ray. Or...
What?
Doing a lot of other things that aren't Roku.
Like what?
So these speakers literally become useless when not using Roku products.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just Roku lock-in, it's like hardcore Roku lock-in.
Yeah.
Unintentionally. Like, Nilay Patel, who works at The Verge, he had tweeted out The Verge's article about this, but his actual tweet was very good. It's like, buying speakers that only work with one box and fall back to your TV speakers for gaming just seems... insane.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
It's like, you have a product that could have been great.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't have been for everyone.
And from what I understand, they actually sound pretty good. And stuff, too. They're not bad.
So...
It's not usable.
Yeah. The pricing structure for anyone that, like, just only watches Netflix and has a Roku TV or has a Roku and wants these.
Yeah.
Pricing structure, it's $150 if you go and order it right now.
If the only thing you do is media streaming.
Yeah.
This is maybe okay. You don't watch Blu-rays, you don't play games,
or
you don't watch cable TV.
Or if like you play games but you don't play them on this TV, you play them.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, so if you're looking at buying these, $150 if you go buy it right now. Here in I think it's about a month, the price goes up to $180, and then from there in October the price goes up to $199.
Which has made us wondering, we were talking together, maybe this is like an early access thing and they're going to figure out the whole other using other devices with the thing in the future, and that's when the full price will launch.
Yeah.
So you're like, you can get $50 off and you don't have full functionality yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because while these obviously will work with dedicated Roku boxes, they're very clearly, like, to me at least, designed for the Roku TVs. Like TCL, for example, has been growing in popularity very fast because for the price, they're the best HDR
They are.
TVs under $1,000.
Yeah.
Like, that's, if you're buying a TV under $1,000, you should go, and you're, like the upper range of that, you should go with a TCL 6 series.
Yes.
It's just, that's what you should do.
Yes. And there's nothing to compete.
Yeah, and that has
at the
Roku.
time of filming this.
Yeah,
so
that has Roku built in. So that was the TV they showed at this demo.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you hook this up, because like if you're already hooking up Roku boxes, you could probably figure out a speaker.
Yes, exactly,
But
yeah.
This is meant for like, oh, I bought this Roku TV. Sounds okay.
Yeah.
Video's
to
really
the user,
good.
they don't even know that it's Roku. It's just, I have a smart TV, it's got a Netflix button, and it's got a YouTube button.
I believe the remote says Roku on it.
Okay, well, yeah, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Like the user is not going to be somebody that needs to even be very aware of much. They just, I mean, I guess they need to know they're using a Roku product, and that's literally it. And these are supposed to work with it. And so, I think that is the target audience, absolutely. Yeah.
And so the fact that they couldn't get gaming working on those TVs at least
is frustrating.
Yeah.
You'd think they'd at least be able to manage that, right? They'd at least be able to manage some kind of pass-through with that.
Yeah. So
maybe it's a software thing that they can fix.
We'll see if they change that, and if I see any indication that gets updated, we'll update you in a future show. But yeah,
because if they can get it working, then it's a great product. It's like it's actually a great product for your normal home consumer, right? But as of right now, unless you only watch media,
only
it's not
stream
usable.
media.
Well, yeah. You only stream media. It has to be able to be functioning on a Roku. So one
or
option.
you're okay with using Bluetooth for everything.
Yeah, right. Which is not good latency wise, even low latency Bluetooth. And of course, you could, you could be one of the super nerds that has like an HD home run connected to your network that you use to get wireless TV with, and then you have that connected to your server, which you then could get the app for the Roku on. But at that point, you're probably not buying one-touch button Roku speakers. You're probably buying something higher end than that because you know what you're doing.
Or just something that's cheaper.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, anyway. So, rapid fire?
Yeah,
is the
let's
next
rapid
section?
fire through some things. First up is some power supplies from NZXT.
Kind of weird. So, NZXT has made PSUs in the past. But it's been a while. They never got that great of ratings, although I did appreciate that they made white ones. But they kind of stepped it up a little bit here. So these new PSUs, they're standard, they're E-Series ATX PSUs. So they're standard ATX PSUs, no SFX or anything like that in the lineup yet. Again, it's the E-Series lineup. They're made by Seasonic, which is a pretty good OEM. They make pretty solid PSUs, so that's an acceptable OEM for them to go with. So they shouldn't have problems. And they have them, they're fully modular. They're actually very good looking PSUs. They don't have a whole bunch of colors on the sides. They do on the top and bottom. They have some on like the labels and stuff. But that area, since it's not seen too frequently, I'm more okay with it because if you have a power supply shroud, it's just a blacked out design, which looks really good in my opinion, despite the NZXT logo not being just black. Right, so I can appreciate that. Like, I mean, in terms of the logo design itself, but it's just black on this to make it match. Now it comes in 3 units. There's a 500 watt for $125. There's a 650 watt for $135, and an 850 watt for 850 watt for $150. Very, very, very solid pricing for that. Obviously there's no testing on the actual efficiency yet, so there's no point in really going over a lot of that. We'll need to wait for like Johnny Guru and Tom's Hardware and Tweaktown to do proper testing on these PSUs. But here's where it gets interesting. And I'm not going to rant about the second portion of this much, but I need to a little bit still.
Great.
So anyway, active power usage monitoring, and on the 12-volt rail, and active temperature monitoring. This is really cool. It's just like Corsair Link, which Corsair has over on their HXI and AXI series PSUs, where you can monitor your power usage. And you can monitor, I think with the AX, you can even monitor like individual cables or something. It's kind of crazy. But you can monitor your power usage, your temperatures, other things like that, your fan speed. Really nice to be able to know that stuff about PSUs, because PSUs have always been this thing that just sits there and does its stuff.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been a lot of added features. This does the same thing. And it goes through NZXT's CAM software, which is the problem I have with it. NZXT's CAM software is very functional and very pretty, but broken fairly frequently. And that's the problem is NZXT, please fix your software before adding more features to it. That's my opinion. Is it's been a long time coming, and you guys have done a lot of aesthetic upgrades. You guys have done a lot of other upgrades, but you haven't fixed some of the main primary issues with it, such as why do my CPU temps go up 8 degrees on a 1950X just because I have NZXT CAM open in the background? Now not running in the background.
NZXT cam is just that baller.
I guess so, right? And by that, I mean I don't mean running in the background. Like if you know when it's minimized to like or not minimized but closed, but running in a little task section, right, in the background to monitor your temperatures and stuff, it works great, totally fine. But once you have it actually open where you can view it on the desktop, even if you put stuff on top of it, temps go up.
Yeah.
Don't know why CPU usage doesn't go up, just temps shoot up. I don't understand. I was so confused. I'm like, why does my CPU seem like it's running so hot? I don't get it. And I started closing things to see if a specific application was causing the problem. I'm like, I'll close Chrome because I have 97 tabs open. I'll close, Adobe Media Encoder because it's using 25 gigs of RAM. I'll close all these things. And then I close Cam, and all of a sudden I see the temps go, boom. And what's weird is the temps don't stay high. They'll jump like 10 degrees and then slowly go back down and then jump back to 10 degrees hotter. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if it's like a misread or what. Anyway, please fix your software, but this is still a great addition, and if they made a really high wattage unit, it'd probably be my next PSU. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so another really fun one, this is actually really quick and simple though. Aquantia, the makers of the budget-oriented 10 gigabit NICs that are on like my motherboard, for example, or ones you can buy through like Asus and stuff. The NICs are made by Aquantia. They're the Action series, AQTION, Action.
Yeah.
It's pretty clever, but pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, because the Q's capital, so it looks really quirky. But anyway, they have a blacked out edition now. Now, it's not actually a blacked out edition of their 10 gigabit NIC. It's a gaming edition of their 10 gigabit NIC, but I'm going to call it the blacked out edition of their 10 gigabit NIC because I'm sick of seeing there was ones with red. I think I saw some with green PCBs. It's disgusting. No people that need this kind of a high-end NIC, chances are fairly high, probably a 50-50 split, that they care about aesthetics. There's going to be the super nerds that are enthusiasts of PCs that want these, and then there's going to be the people that actually need them in workstations. They're not going to care about looks, but the other half cares about looks. So this is really good. It also comes with software to prioritize game packets. Whatever, we've never really seen that work very well from other companies like Killer and stuff. It doesn't make much of a difference, if at all. But it includes it, and there was some interesting other software aspects, but I'm not going to get into all the details of it. It mostly was just packet prioritization, yay. Although you can like actively monitor applications data usage and like throttle certain applications or something with it. So this is another one that I want to talk about. Google Chrome strict site isolation is now enabled by default, and that's the big news. You may have seen all the articles around going, oh, Google Chrome update's going to use more RAM. That's not exactly what that means. What it means is Google Chrome's getting an update to enable a feature that they've had for a while by default. Yeah, we both
have had it on because you told me about it.
And you turned it on too, right. Which, speaking of which, grab a tab right now. Any tab, I just drag it like you were going to make a new window. See how it turns white for a second? Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem to happen as bad when strict site isolation is turned off. I don't know why it seems to be so much smoother otherwise. So anyway, strict site isolation, really good feature. It helps with Spectre and Meltdown, but also other security vulnerabilities, to stability if a particular tab crashes or something like that. But it does use 10 to 15% more RAM because they can't do as much optimization. Yeah. That's just how it works. So anyway, it's being enabled by default. You should have enabled it anyway yourself.
But now most people don't know where that would have been at.
It's a really hard thing to find, but now they're just pushing it out, enabling it by default, which they should be doing because it's more secure. So good on them for doing it. People will complain, but realistically, 10 to 15% more RAM may sound like a lot for people, especially because Chrome's notorious for RAM usage. For people that have 100 tabs open like me, of course, that is a difference. 10% more of like 15 gigabytes is a lot, but for the generic user that has 6 tabs open, say as an example, it's like, going from 500 megabytes to, say 6 or 700 megabytes is not a big deal. Yeah. Then the last thing, Microsoft and Walmart team up to compete with Amazon. This is really interesting.
Yeah, so you have Amazon's biggest competitor in retail, Walmart, and Amazon's biggest competitor in data, Microsoft. Yeah. And they're teaming up to just compete with Amazon. So it's a 5-year partnership. Walmart's going to be doing some things like using Azure and Office 365. But the interesting things with this is that Walmart is going to be using a lot of like Microsoft's AI, machine learning, data platforms, things like that. Part of what makes Amazon able to do so much is info, having AI be able to fluctuate prices, having all this other stuff. Like, there's so many things that Amazon can do with software. Yeah. And Walmart having access to that is going to make them a lot more competitive.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
It's something that you won't see immediately. It's something that consumers won't really necessarily notice, but it's probably going to help out Walmart a hell of a lot.
And it's good to see some competition against Amazon on any front because
Yeah.
they're too big at this point in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. So I'm happy about it. I think it's overall a good thing.
Mhm.
But that's all we have for you guys today. So of course, please like and subscribe, and also or thumbs down if you hate us for some reason. That's fine too. Leave a comment down below of what you think. Obviously, check all the links in the description. We've got the links to all the articles in the description down there. We've also got links to our Patreon page, our website, which we have news articles and stuff like that on, our forums, our other social media forums and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, that's it, guys. We'll see you guys next week. This should be uploaded most Thursdays. Maybe sometimes it'll be Fridays, depending on how much time I have to edit. Right, but anyway, there we go.
Cool.
I'm gonna wave at the camera. You're not gonna wave at the camera?
No.